this for a few weeks.
They put you on the, they put you on ice.
They put me on ice.
They put you on ice. That's coming down.
What is going on, everyone? This is the Ball Don't Lie podcast here on Penn State Sports Night. I believe it is episode 35. 35 of them we got done from the start of last school year up until now. Obviously, it's an honor. We've had the changing of the guards a bit. Start off with David Green. We've had Ryan Lamb in there for a little bit. Now, of course, we got Matt Szczypiorski, another Philadelphia 76er fan to keep it going, I guess.
Yes, sir. Proud to be the resident Sixer fan, keeping everybody sane.
Okay. But let's talk about Derrick Rose here, who's not on the Sixers, but got traded to the New York Knicks for basically nothing, a.k.a. Dennis Smith Jr., that 2021 second-round pick, averaging 14 points per game this season. He did make his debut with the Knicks last night. Also, a little bit of a fun fact, Tom Thibodeau, he has never coached a team without Derrick Rose, essentially. He's been a head coach for the Bulls, Timberwolves, and the Knicks. And Derrick Rose has been on all those teams at one point or another. Just a little fun fact there. Anyways, though, Matt, what were your thoughts on this trade for both sides here?
Well, I thought this is a weird trade for both sides, in my opinion. You know, Rose kind of doesn't really fit the Knicks bench rotation, as they already have Emmanuel Quickley, who has been great so far to start his rookie campaign, as well as Austin Rivers, who has had some good games for them. All this point guard talent, and yet Elfrid Payton is still starting. I don't get it. But for the Pistons, they essentially got nothing, like you said, for arguably their greatest trade chip. And, you know, Dennis Smith Jr. hasn't seen valuable NBA minutes in over a year. And a second-round pick is pretty much useless unless the Pistons strike gold. So I'm surprised the Pistons didn't hold on to Rose until the deadline and see if more competitive teams came in with a better offer.
Yeah, this was a really weird trade. I tend to think the Knicks definitely won this trade just because, like, I have a hard time imagining that was the best offer you could have gotten for Derrick Rose. I think he's a very valuable bench player that a lot of teams would have liked to have, especially last year too, where his stock may have been a little higher because his numbers were a little bit better. So I don't understand how this was the trade you wanted. Dennis Smith Jr., did he need a new change of scenery? I think so. Obviously, it didn't look like the Knicks really wanted him. It already got to the point that he asked to be on the Westchester Knicks, the G League team, because that he was sick and tired of riding the bench. But the Dennis Smith Jr. thing is interesting just because I think a lot of people thought he'd be really good coming out of NC State. I just don't think he's a great team basketball player. NC State actually had a better record after he left the team. I think he's a guy who grew up in the AAU era who unfortunately just didn't really know how to play the game and really play within a system. And the second-round pick's really the most valuable thing here. So the Pistons are probably just going to hope the Knicks suck the rest of the season so they can get a high second-round pick. That's basically what you're banking on at this point.
Yeah, Dennis Smith Jr., he's an interesting player. I think I like the comparison of the AAU kind of generational player here. He's a really good dunker. That's pretty cool to watch. But other than that, he can't really do anything. He can't shoot the ball really well. He's more like a flashy player than anything else, and he can't play defense either. Definitely an AAU type player.
Yeah, can't pass either at the point guard spot. Yeah, I mean, obviously the NBA, it's all about dribble, pass, and shoot. And if you can't do two of those things, you're kind of a useless guard and can't play defense. I mean, yikes. But, yeah, I do like this trade for the Knicks. I actually did hear that they might trade Austin Rivers because he's had a pretty good year. So then I guess that makes this a little more reasonable. Apparently, Derrick Rose went out to dinner with the two rookies, Obi Toppin and Emmanuel Quickley, gave them his cell phone number, basically said, I'm here if you need me. So I think that's another big reason why the Knicks made this move for Derrick Rose, because he's a culture guy. Everyone loves Derrick Rose, respects Derrick Rose. I mean, a lot of these young players probably looked up to Derrick Rose. So I think having him there, Tom Thibodeau, of course, that's his guy. And it seems like he's there for the long haul. He's had a great season coaching the Knicks so far. And it looks like they're going to be in the hunt for the playoffs too. So you might as well get a guy in there who's going to be able to help you do that.
Yeah, you definitely need a veteran type guy, especially with this team. This team is so young right now, and there's all their stars are young players. Julius Randle is probably the only one you could say who has veteran type leadership, but he's not even that old. He's like 24, 25, and he's pretty young still. And Emmanuel Quickley's obviously a rookie. RJ Barrett's in his second year. He's playing really well. So you definitely need that veteran leadership, and D Rose is a great guy to bring in.
Yeah, I'm a fan of this trade for the Knicks. The Pistons, I don't know what they're doing because I feel like you could have gotten a little more for Derrick Rose, but maybe they couldn't have. I don't know. But I want to talk about an interesting thing here. A little bit funny because sometimes, in this around the association, there's not a whole lot to talk about, but I thought this was pretty interesting. Draymond Green, I don't know if you saw this, Matt, but he shot a half-court shot off an inbounds pass with 8 seconds on the game clock against the San Antonio Spurs. And he had an interesting soundbite after the game saying, quote, "It was the smartest dumb play in history. Very smart play that ended up being dumb as hell." And Steve Kerr said that the Spurs do not foul in those situations. Probably my fault for not informing the team that the Spurs don't usually foul. DeJounte Murray hit the game winner there, hit a step back three. That was filthy. But what were your thoughts on this, Matt? I think Draymond Green was just kind of looking for the whistle and didn't get it. And he looked pretty stupid doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to see Draymond Green look like an idiot on the floor sometimes. But I watched it and I was very confused about what in the world Draymond was thinking, as we all were kind of. It's weird to me because the Warriors have played the Spurs so many times over the years, especially this group of veteran players with Steve Kerr. And it's so weird that they would just forget that the Spurs don't foul in that situation. And why do you not put the ball in Curry's hands immediately in that situation? Like, why is he not getting the inbound? Why are you not passing to him when as soon as he gets the ball? Like, why would you not want the ball in Steph Curry's hands?
Yeah, I feel like the play was supposed to go to Steph Curry because, like, Draymond got the inbounds pass. I'd imagine that he was going to play hot potato and get it right to him. But nevertheless, he still shot that. I don't know what happened. That's like if you're accidentally playing 2K and you hold down the X button too long, you shoot a half-court shot. You're like, no, it's not what to do. That's kind of what this reminded me of. But yeah, just kind of something to poke fun at. Seems like there's always something weird going on with the Warriors over these last couple of weeks. But yeah, I thought that was a funny thing. But a not so funny situation here. Malik Beasley has been given a 120-day sentence to be served following an arrest in October. So he's going to be serving this after the season's done. It's always weird how these fines and stuff get handed out and how it affects basketball. I remember KCP had a weird thing where he was like in jail, but like he was allowed to like play Laker home games and play road California games. So he actually like wasn't really missing a whole lot. But anyways, though, Shams reported that the threat of violence charge that is on Beasley will be reduced to a misdemeanor after completion of probation. And then a felony drug charge that was also handed out to him will be dismissed. Now, Malik Beasley, this guy is definitely a mess. The whole Larson Pippen situation was messy, to say the least. Matt, what's your take on this? Because it's funny, because despite all of this, Malik Beasley is actually having a career season.
Yeah, it's obviously unfortunate for him, unfortunate for his name. But it's funny that you bring up Kentavious Caldwell-Pope because that was the only thing I wrote down for the situation. Was that I wish they would let Malik Beasley play with an ankle monitor like they did with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, because that was one of the funniest pictures I've ever seen in an NBA game.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, that whole situation like didn't make sense at all. Yeah, as a Laker fan, I was like, why are they allowing this guy to play?
Yeah.
And I mean, the Lakers, that was before they were even like good. So losing him really didn't mean a whole lot to their season. But yeah, this Malik Beasley thing, I just find it funny that all this drama is going on and he's still having like a very good year despite all this. So I guess good for him for being able to kind of have tunnel vision and still go out there and do his thing. But yeah, all the stuff going on around him, I feel like there's definitely a lot more there that we don't even know from a public perspective.
Yeah, the Larsa Pippen thing too was very interesting. I don't want to talk. I don't want to say anything, but that was pretty weird.
Yeah, we're gonna hot potato to a different topic here. We're talking about Kevin Garnett. He was praising the current NBA stars, basically saying that players from 20 years ago couldn't play in today's NBA. They'd get crossed up. He also said that it's really hard to play defense in today's NBA due to you can't really hand check anybody and things like that. What are your thoughts on Kevin Garnett? Do you think he's right?
You telling me Shaq and Kobe couldn't play in today's game? Tracy McGrady, Vince Carter did play in today's game and 20 years ago. I don't believe this for the truly great players. I think their talent should span through generations, especially, from as little as 20 years ago. But for the more average players, that statement might hold a little bit more water. But, for the truly great players, as Kevin Garnett was, I think he could play in this era too. He's got a decent jump shot. I don't know about that.
Yeah, that's always been my opinion on stuff. Like, I always feel like great players will be great no matter what generation they're in. And even if it's a different generation that doesn't like coordinate with their skills will change the game itself. I mean, that's what an all-time great player does, like you mentioned, Matt. Is the landscape of the NBA different? Absolutely. There's guys who have different skill sets that maybe fit 10 years ago that don't fit today, or 20 years ago and don't fit today. So I think Kevin Garnett is right to an extent. But yeah, I think, the all-time great players are going to be great regardless of their generation.
Absolutely. And with the talent too, part of their talent is being able to adjust to whatever defenses are throwing at them, whatever offenses are throwing at them. And, especially guys like Kobe Bryant, like they were so talented and so smart on the basketball court. Like their IQ was so high, they could pretty much play in any era, I think.
Yeah. And I think it's worth knowing too that, if you drop the player in a different era, they're going to adjust to that era, like in theory. So I think that is also worth noting too. Some change of scenery, if you will. So obviously players and teams have not been going to the White House the last couple of years. But now it's looking like it's going to change. The Lakers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, coming off a Super Bowl win, they are expected to get DC invites, quote, when it's COVID safe. Matt, what are your thoughts on this? Are we going to start to see this tradition back?
Well, by that time, when it's COVID safe, we might have already crowned a new NBA champion, Hunter, unless it's the Lakers who win again. But
or new president, who knows?
Yeah. But yeah, all this really did was remind me about how long COVID has gone on. And I saw a meme the other day that said, man, COVID won't even last that long. And then COVID was a picture of Perry Ellis in a Kansas jersey because he was there for like 9 years. So yeah, I thought that was pretty funny.
God, the Perry Ellis. I remember watching him like, is this guy ever gonna leave?
Yeah, he was there for so long.
Oh my God. Like I made like a joke, like he's had 3 kids since then. Like God, he brought me back because I used to always make that joke. Like, why is Perry Ellis still at the school? Like, I feel like he's been here forever. Shout out Perry Ellis. I guess I didn't think that I'm glad you brought him up because I was not expecting his name to be brought up this podcast.
Yeah.
But also too, this is breaking as of yesterday. Mark Cuban announced that the Dallas Mavericks won't be won't be playing the national anthem during games. So basically, gonna go straight from warmups into the tip-off, I guess, itself. Maybe that saves a couple minutes. Games can start a couple minutes earlier. I guess that's one benefit of it. But what are your thoughts on this, Matt? Hearing this, I think right now the Mavs are the only professional U.S. team to do it. So I guess what's your take here?
Well, it's always funny how people say, how certain people will say like, oh, I don't want politics in sports. But then all of a sudden, so a team says, I don't want to do national anthem. And now all of a sudden it's political. And now all of a sudden it's like a whole big issue. And, it's always kind of been weird to me how, we've associated the national anthem with sports, like how it needs to be played before a sporting event. Like even as a kid, even in high school, like in my football games, I would have the national anthem play before. And I would just sit there and wonder, like, why are we doing this? I guess it's, patriotic, but the national anthem really doesn't have anything to do with sports unless it's the Olympics or like a Super Bowl or something like that. But, before like a regular season game, it's not that big of a deal. And honestly, what they should be doing is they should be playing the Slovenian national anthem for Luka Doncic, maybe get that team a little bit more fired up.
Yeah, it's pretty true. Yeah, it's also interesting with the Mavericks because they have a lot of foreign players, both European guys and Canadian players too. So I always thought that was interesting, like for foreign players, like that national anthem really doesn't mean a whole lot to them. Yeah, it's interesting. I think how it came about, and I hope I get my facts right. I think it was baseball that may have started doing it. I think they did it once for some promotional thing, and people were like, oh, I guess that's cool. I mean, no one's done that before, and it just became like a worldwide sports thing. It doesn't shock me at all that the Mavericks are the first team to do it. Mark Cuban is one of the most active owners in sports in terms of social justice movement stuff. Like he was out there donating money, out there marching and things. So it doesn't shock me at all that Dallas was the first one to do it. Will other teams do it? I'm not sure. Will the whole NBA end up doing it? I'm not really so sure about that. But I thought it was an interesting decision. And if anything, it probably just ends any sort of confrontation, if you will. Now you can't stand sit or kneel for the national anthem because it's not even there.
Yeah. And like you said, Hunter, I'm not surprised that Markey was the first person to do this either. He's always been, kind of like a trailblazer in that way. And, even with bringing all these European players over, I don't know what to say about like the whole, where the whole country agrees with it. Obviously this is a country that's pretty divided right now, but I mean, someone had to do it.
Yeah, I respect them for taking a stand at the bare minimum and doing what they think's right and having the guts to do it too. I don't think they played the national anthem at any of their games so far this year either, from what I've been told. But anyways, though, one more political thing here. But sorry, we're getting here ball and live. But this is a story that I actually fetched up. And I haven't heard it anywhere in the media, but I was able to catch my eye on it, and I kind of wanted to bring attention to it. So apparently there's a Utah school district that's offering to, quote, opt out of Black History Month, basically saying that if you are not, basically your parents and students can opt out from like learning about it, basically how like people opt out from taking state tests, if you will, so they can like refuse to learn stuff about it. Donovan Mitchell, obviously he's one of the more outspoken players about this stuff in the NBA. That's how I saw it on his Twitter, him responding to it. What were your thoughts on this, Matt? It's kind of crazy to think that, a place would have the audacity to do this during Black History Month.
Yeah, that's a tough look in 2021, man. That just openly admitting you're racist. God, very bold. I obviously don't agree with it. That's ridiculous. It's part of, our culture, part of our history to learn about our past and to change from it because, as we've always said, those who don't learn their history are doomed to repeat it. And if, they're telling kids that, oh, you don't have to learn about this, then what is that teaching them for the future?
Yeah, it doesn't shock me, unfortunately, because Utah has
Absolutely
this reputation. And I kind of want to build off this point because I feel like, we're eventually, I think, going to see expansion teams. We're going to see teams move perhaps to different locations. I think Utah could be one of those teams that move. Now, there have been opposing players and current players who are on the Utah Jazz right now who have basically said that, and I hate to categorize all Utah Jazz fans because I doubt it's all of them. I'm sure there are good ones out there, 100%, just a disclaimer. But there are fans out there that have said some not so nice things about players due to race. And it kind of makes me wonder if they would ever relocate at all from Utah because they're the only sports team, professional sports team, I believe, in Utah right now, at least of the major four sports in the United States. They also, I think, is a big reason they don't get free agents very much because players talk. And they know, like, yeah, Salt Lake is not a very friendly place for diversity, per se. And so I think that stops them from getting free agents. They're a really well-ran organization otherwise. They have great coaching, really good players. They play both ends of the floor. They have a great front office, too. So I just kind of wonder, Matt, is it crazy for me to say that they might relocate? Not like in the immediate future, but at some point, especially if a team like Vegas is looking for an NBA team, Seattle's looking for an NBA team. I don't know. I don't think it's too far-fetched to think that.
Well, initially, Hunter, I would say no, just because of the almighty dollar. And, players may not love playing there, like you said, but the team has been successful since the 90s, and they've been raking in the coin ever since. As long as there's coin, they ain't going anywhere. But now that I think about it, and now, especially with, how open, we are about how, everybody's feeling and all this, like how, African-American players who make up the majority of the NBA are taking a stand in social justice issues. I don't know how much longer they're able to stand how openly racist some of Utah's fans are. And, I think that could eventually lead to a move, and it could lead to a strike against playing in Utah or playing, players playing for Utah.
Yeah, when you break the almighty dollar, which we love talking about here on Ball Don't Lie, because we're both pretty real that has a big effect on things. I think I don't know, would you make more money in Vegas or Seattle? I mean, Seattle's dying for a team. I think they would show out for any team that moved there. And I think Vegas too. The NBA's had a lot of success with the summer league there. So obviously it's an avid place for basketball fans. All the betting, of course, people like, I'm sure, obviously Las Vegas is a poppin' place in general. They got the Las Vegas Aces, the WNBA team that's been very successful. The Raiders, of course. So I don't think it's too far-fetched to think a team can move there. And I think the Jazz in a really small market, and they have their fan base is strong. But I don't know. I don't think that's too crazy to think about. Maybe not in the next year or so, but maybe long-term down the road, if there's a facility available. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe 10, 15 years from now, we could be thinking about a totally different story.
And it's a West Coast team too.
Yeah.
It's on the West Coast, just like Vegas and Seattle is. But I don't know. That's just some food for thought there. But let's talk about a player here in LaMelo Ball. He had 7 threes and 10 assists in a game. Only rookies the other to do that are Steph Curry and Jason Kidd. It seems like ever since he got put into the starting lineup, he has just reached a whole nother level. It's not looking like it's going to be close for Rookie of the Year now. As good as Tyrese Halliburton has played, LaMelo has just kind of hit another level. Do you think he's a future superstar in the making?
Well, it sure seems like it, Hunter. Giving him the starting job, as you said, and minutes has done wonders for his stats. As he's had a couple 30-point games since being put in the starting lineup. I said it last week, I think. This could be the Bledsoe Brady moment for LaMelo's career. Obviously not to the same scale because he was supposed to start eventually. But all he needed was an opening due to injury, and he got it, and he's ran with it.
Yeah, I can't help but think LaMelo is like a star in the making too. I said entering the draft, his best case scenario would be like Trae Young, but he's 6'7". And it's kind of what it's starting to look like right now. I feel like the big difference between him and Lonzo is just confidence. Like LaMelo does not care. He is risky. He goes for it. He's flashy. Lonzo's a lot more conservative and timid. And LaMelo Ball also averages more than double the amount of drives to the basket per game that Lonzo does. And I hate to compare him, but I actually think LaMelo's a better player right now than Lonzo is. And what he's doing right now is really impressive. And I do think that he's going to end up being one of the best point guards in the NBA if he keeps it up.
Yeah, you could make the argument that LaMelo in 2 months has put together a better 2-month stretch than LaMelo or Lonzo has his entire career. I think LaMelo is certainly better as a 19-year-old than Lonzo is right now as a 22, 23-year-old.
Yeah, LaMelo Ball, I mean, he's also one of the most fun players to watch too because he seems like he's having a lot of fun out there playing. The Hornets score a whole lot of points. The passing, the ball handling, the shooting, he's got it all. And I think his future is, in fact, very bright. But we always give a little bit of an injury report here as well on Ball Don't Lie because this is around the association. I'll give you the latest updates. Lauri Markkanen, who seems like he's always hurt, is going to be out for another 2 to 4 weeks with a right shoulder sprain. DeAndre Hunter had surgery on his meniscus, and the Hawks will provide an update in 2 weeks. So he's out for at least 2 weeks. And Larry Nance Jr. out 4 to 6 weeks for a fractured finger on his left hand. I don't know, Matt. Any of these injuries pretty noteworthy for you?
Markkanen just can't stay healthy, man. That's the only thing I wrote down for him. DeAndre Hunter injury is huge for the Hawks. He's the only one who can play defense on that perimeter. And he was enjoying a breakout season, as we've talked about a couple podcasts ago. And the Cavs we find without Larry Nance, half their roster is centers. So,
yeah, DeAndre Hunter, that one's definitely a big loss because he's kind of like their top defender on that team. Larry Nance had a pretty nice season, and Kevin Love is still currently out. We'll see if he comes back anytime soon because he might. And Lauri Markkanen, this has kind of just been his whole career. Is that this guy just unfortunately can't stay healthy. But before we get into our players of the week, Matt, tell the fans the motto of this podcast.
No team left behind, mother.
Yezerski. Now let's go to our players of the week. We each give 3 every week. We don't tell each other who we have, so it's always fun if we ever get the same ones. Matt, who made the list for you this week?
I think this guy's the most obvious one. It's Steph Curry, aided by his 57-point performance on Saturday night and scoring at least 28 points in all 5 of his games over the past week. He's shooting 50% from 3 in those games. And how could you even be surprised? He's the best 3-point shooter ever, period. He was the most obvious choice for Player of the Week honors. He has been carrying this team the entire season and has been the difference between the Warriors competing for a playoff spot and the Warriors being one of the worst teams in the league. And we saw that last year. He won't win MVP this year because his team is not good. But in terms of a player being most valuable to his team, he's up there with the likes of LeBron and Embiid, Jokic for keeping this team relevant.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We had that kind of discussion last week during our podcast. Be sure to check that out if you want. There's some juicy content in there. Yeah, I mean, Steph Curry has been absolutely phenomenal this season. A guy who might even be first team All NBA, despite the fact that the Warriors aren't good. Like you said, they probably would be competing for the number 1 pick again in the lottery if it wasn't for Steph Curry and his heroics. He has been spectacular. I mean, think about it. He had 57 in a game and they lost to Dallas, I think. So, like, the fact that they're still not winning games and he's playing that well is a bit concerning. I feel like it's when their other guys play well when they actually do win games because Steph Curry is always going to bring it no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you need Kelly Oubre to score 40 points a game and find his 3-point stroke to win a game. It's pretty unfortunate.
Yeah. So we'll see how the Warriors are going to be able to respond. Maybe they make a move or two at the deadline. But I got another obvious name on here, of course, Jonas Valanciunas. But he's had a good season, a good stretch for them. He's averaging 25 and 13 and a half on 73% shooting from the field and 93% shooting from the line. They're 2-2, including a win over your 76ers during this past week. Jonas Valanciunas has had to really step it up this year because there's been no Jaren Jackson. So he's kind of been the low post threat for Memphis. Memphis has been a pretty hot team. They're climbing in their way into the playoffs right now, and he's a big reason why.
Yeah, he's played really well. And even last year, I remember him playing really well. He fit really well with the team when, he was traded to Memphis in that Marc Gasol trade, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was just kind of like the throw-in. And ever since then, he's played really well. He's earned a spot on that team. He's earned another contract, I believe, with that team. So he's definitely panned out well for them when they didn't probably expect him to.
Yeah, Jonas Valanciunas has always been a really solid center in the NBA. Never like an all-star caliber guy or anything like that, but has always been a good player, starting caliber center. So who else made your list here, Matt?
I got De'Aaron Fox. Fox was a catalyst for the Kings, winning 4 games in a row this past week before losing last night to the best team in the league, the Philadelphia 76ers. In his last 5 games, Fox has scored 38, 26, 24, 36, and 34 while shooting 52% from the floor in those games. His 3-point shot has improved dramatically this season. Fox could end up being one of those players snubbed from the All-Star team because of the team he plays for, similar to Bradley Beal last year. Especially with his recent comments about this year's All-Star game being stupid. I agree, De'Aaron. I think that could end up leading to him not being on the team.
Yeah, De'Aaron Fox has had a phenomenal season. I think Amin Al-Hassan basically got him going after he said that John Moran is what De'Aaron Fox wants to be. And then De'Aaron Fox is like, okay, you know what? Watch this. Yeah, I will say a swipe of the Fox did shake Ben Simmons out of his boots a little bit. Get the door reference, but last night. But yeah, the Sixers did end up winning that game. De'Aaron Fox has been a monster this year, and I'm sure on Ball Don't Lie we'll maybe fill out like a mock All-Star ballot or not. But De'Aaron Fox is someone I definitely would consider putting on, especially given how hot the Kings have been recently.
Yeah, especially with how well they're playing recently. It's just that Sacramento is like that notorious team that nobody thinks about. But 24 points per game, which is what he's averaging right now, is nothing to sneeze at.
Not at all. Yeah, he's been a monster for them this year. Next on my list is going to be Nikola Vucevic. Had a career-high 43 points against Chicago, also averaging 29 and 14 on the season. This is a team that unfortunately has been a little bit riddled with injuries. Jonathan Isaac was already ruled out for the year before he even played because he got hurt in the bubble really bad. Markelle Fultz is also out for the year, I believe, tore his ACL. So that's 2 big injuries that they had on that team. We don't really talk about the Magic a whole lot, so I wanted to give them some love because, no team gets left behind here.
Yeah, the Magic, we said before the season, they're probably the most boring team in the NBA. He's probably their only notable player, and even then, most casual fans probably wouldn't know about him. He made an All-Star team a couple seasons ago, and I think similar to De'Aaron Fox, he's probably going to miss out on the All-Star team this year because his team is the bootiest of cheeks, and because he is not a notable player. He's not a household name.
Yeah, not at all. Shout out to our Penn State Sports Night member, Logan Brandes, though, rooting for the Magic. But yeah, unfortunately, there aren't a whole lot of them out there otherwise. I think usually when Orlando, they have a game, usually it's the other opposing team that gets more fans in the stands.
Yeah, usually. I mean, they're one of the few teams that have fans in the stands right now, and they are still getting outdrawn. So
Yeah, even their own family members don't show out to play. They know how it's going to go. But anyway, so who rounds out the list here for you?
Well, we just talked about him. It's LaMelo Ball. Since being inserted to the starting lineup, like we talked about earlier, LaMelo has been balling out. In his last 4 games, he's had 22, 34, 19, and 24, including a double-double last night with the 10 assists, as we talked about earlier. His 3-point percentage, though, his shooting, it was shaky to start the season, but in his last 6 games, he's shooting 52.5% from 3, including his 7 threes last night. Seems like he's got a tight grip on the Rookie of the Year.
Yeah.
Especially I want it to be Tyrese Halliburton. He's got.
Yeah, I mean, I think the 2 things with LaMelo that or a couple things. It's like he does turn the ball over a lot. He's not always the most efficient shooter, and he sucks on defense. But he's been doing a better job not turning the ball over, and he is shooting the ball really well right now. So when at least two of those things are going right, he is definitely a problem to be messed with. And like we said, I mean, right now he's looking like an up and coming star.
Absolutely. All he has to do is not be a turnstile on defense. He could be a all-star sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it's a good point to bring up. So LaMelo Ball was supposed to play at UCLA, but then decommitted, went overseas, and the rest of the story. So I'm going to go with a guy who actually did play at UCLA, and that's Norman Powell for the Toronto Raptors. He's averaging 22 points per game on 53% shooting, 52 from three, and 90% from the line. So he's in the 50-50-90 club. We always talk about how efficient that is for a shooting perspective. Also got some big wins over the Brooklyn Nets and Memphis Grizzlies over this last week. And, we'll get into it very, very soon. But Norman Powell, I feel like, is probably one of the more underrated players in the NBA. Just a really solid guy that the Raptors have always kept around.
Yeah, Norman Powell has been, the Raptors staple off the bench there for a couple of years now. He's almost averaging those Desmond Bane numbers where he's shooting a higher three-point percentage and field goal percentage, but not quite there yet. Not quite the legendary status that Desmond Bane is. But Norman Powell, as we have said, is a really underrated piece of that Raptors team and a very underrated part of their championship a few years ago. I'm glad you brought him up.
Yeah, he got some. I remember he had some big games in that playoff run. He's always got it in him. Got to give him credit. But that's a perfect transition to our next point here. We're gonna be talking about the Toronto Raptors. They're in an interesting spot right now. They have kind of been rolling recently, winning a lot more games. They are currently now all the way back to the 8th seed, 11-13 overall, but have won 4 of their last 5 games. They have let's talk about Kyle Lowry here, because there's been a lot of trade rumors. It actually came out recently that there's a portion of the Raptors personnel who believe that they should actually move on from Kyle Lowry. He's had a pretty good season though, averaging 17 points, 6.7 assists, 5.7 rebounds on very respectable shooting numbers as well. It's worth knowing though that he's actually going to turn 35 this year, and he's on the last year of his deal, $30.1 million due. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think the Raptors should explore a trade, or is this someone that they should bring back for the future?
Well, I have a feeling I know which way you're leaning, so I'm going to say, honestly, what I'm feeling is it'd be really hard for this team to let go of Lowry. He's the heart and soul of that organization and has been for about a decade now. He's probably the face of their franchise. I think they'll end up holding on to him for sentimental reasons, even though they are right now, even where they are right now in the standings and Lowry's contract. All those situations, it screams trade him, especially with how much he's making. He's final year of his deal. But I just think they're going to hold on to him for sentimental reasons. I think the fans would not be happy with the Raptors if they were to trade him.
Do you agree with that though? Like, if you're the Raptors, you would hold on to him too?
Yeah.
It's fine, because I actually do agree with you.
Wow. I thought you were going to say trade him.
No. I mean, unless you get a great offer for him. No, because I think Kyle Lowry, obviously the numbers are really good. I don't think he's going to get $30 million on the market from any team coming out of it. And so I think they're probably going to get a nice little bargain from him, maybe even a hometown discount. I don't know. But no, I think Kyle Lowry's a big culture guy. I think he's one of the best leaders in the NBA. He's someone who literally puts his body out on the line. He's played through a bunch of injuries. He always is one of the leaders in charges taken in the NBA because he's like 6 foot, like 210 pounds, basically. So he can take one like a champ. But I'm a big Kyle Lowry guy. I actually think he's a borderline Hall of Famer. I think that championship definitely changed my mind about him a lot, because it showed that, a guy who's struggling in the playoffs sometimes, he ended up completely changing his narrative and ended up, becoming a champion and really changed the way we view Kyle Lowry.
Yeah, and that's definitely true, because before that championship, I remember saying, Kyle Lowry is not a good player performer. He's, choked the playoffs many times, and that championship run kind of changed that whole narrative, and now we think of him in a different light. But you said he was 6 foot, 210 pounds earlier. I think about 50 of those pounds is in his rear end. He's got the bootiest of cheeks, as we talked about earlier. He's got an absolute wagon on him.
Man, I think bootiest of cheeks is probably the go-to saying here on Balls on Live this episode. But anyways, though, I'm curious to see, like, a little bit of a hypothetical, what he would be on, like, in the open market. I've heard the Clippers could be an interesting team. Not really sure they have a whole lot of picks, though, to give up, and I think that's what the Raptors would want for Kyle Lowry, is to build for the future, and they gave up all of those for Paul George, basically. They also gave up a draft pick for Marcus Morris last year, too. from the Knicks. But also, it's worth noting that I think some teams that I think could be realistic targets is Dallas and Utah. For Dallas, they clearly need another guy there. Luka Doncic can't do it all. As great as he is, he needs some help there, and a guy who can really run that offense and be a veteran leader and can hit timely shots. I think Kyle Lowry's the perfect guy. They have some other backup point guards like a Trey Burke or Jalen Brunson they can throw in. I'm sure they'd be okay with giving up a first-round pick. Even though they are young, it looks like you got to start building now because you can even take a big step further, and they have had a rough start to their year. And I think Utah is interesting too because Mike Conley's also in the final year of his deal. And yeah, he's had a good year. I kind of just look at it as like Kyle Lowry's a better player than Mike Conley. I'd rather have him than Conley. And the money works. So I think that could also be another plausible trade option for a team that's, probably trying to make a run at the championship. Who knows?
Yeah, I think the Utah trade is interesting because if they did Conley for Lowry straight up, that would be a pretty even deal in terms of money. Obviously not the same player. Lowry's significantly better, but I think if the Utah Jazz want to be serious, as they're looking pretty serious right now, I think this is a move they should probably consider because Kyle Lowry obviously has the playoff pedigree now, as we talked about. He's got the experience, and this team needs experience. They've gotten the playoffs last few years now and have not really gone anywhere other than the second round, if they've even gotten that far. So I think they need that veteran presence on their team. They need that player to take the next step.
Yeah, I think Utah and Dallas would be the most realistic ones that it works money wise. They can give up assets to get him, and he definitely fits their timeline. And I got to give Kyle Lowry credit too, because for a guy who's 35 years old, we talk about how great LeBron is at 36. Kyle Lowry's been really good too at 35. He makes the All-Star team just about every year. Not sure he's going to this year though. Maybe he will, but we'll see. There's still some time because Fred VanVleet has kind of been the best player on the Toronto Raptors so far this year. And you also got to realize too that they got Pascal Siakam, who's second team All-NBA. He was a starter in the All-Star game last year too. And they're both younger players. So I am curious to see what kind of direction Toronto's going to be going in. I think how they handle the Kyle Lowry situation will say a lot about how they want to move forward with this franchise.
Absolutely. I think, if they end up trading Lowry, I think that, says to the players and says to the organization, like, look, we're looking to possibly rebuild here, probably retool more than rebuild. And if they hold on to Lowry, it's probably, you can't blame them for it. I would. They would want to remain competitive, hold on to their championship team for as long as they want to. But, with VanVleet, he's obviously proven to be well worth the contract that they gave him, maybe even a steal for the money that they got him at. That's DeMarre Carroll with the Nets money. So that's pretty good steal right there. And then ever since the bubble, Pascal Siakam has kind of been off. Definitely has not been a second team All-NBA player. Definitely not an All-Star game starter worthy player. Ever since he got that extension, he really hasn't been the same player, which is unfortunate because now that contract looks inflated. But he certainly earned it at the time. So you can't really blame the Raptors there. It's just, you got to start asking Siakam to do more.
Are you saying Pascal Siakam sold out for the bag?
I'm not saying it, but I'm also not saying it.
Yeah, I will see. Yeah, he has. I don't know. Maybe teams are just trying to figure him out a little bit more. I think that perimeter shot needs to be a little bit more consistent because he's an inside-out player. He relies on getting to the basket a little more. I think it's a mentality thing for him too, in my opinion. I think he just kind of needs to have that killer mentality more so, and I think he'll be okay there. But I think the Raptors, they have had a very weird season in terms of what kind of team they are. For one, they were always known as a team that had a lot of depth, but they have 4 players averaging over 34 minutes per game. And they really only are about 7, 8 guys deep. They are second in the league in steals per game and third in fast break points, which is not really on par. So they've been really a running gun team. And they got 2 of the top steal leaders. OG Anunoby leads the league in steals per game, and Fred VanVleet is second. So they literally got 2 guys that are just doing a great job, being able to be pests on defense and getting the ball. Defensively, this team has not been nearly as good. They were 3rd in the NBA in defensive rating when they won the championship and 4th last year. This year, they're down to 13, which isn't bad, but for a team that was known for defense, that's not great. And while I said they were great at fast break opportunities, they are second to last in rebounding. So it is, very polar opposite, which you do see sometimes. So I don't know, Matt, what's your take on the Raptors this year? They've been playing better recently. how much higher do you think they can climb up in the standings?
Well, I think it was obviously an adjustment for them, because nobody was concerned about their guard situation. But their big men, losing Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka in the same offseason, that's had obviously a lot to do with their defense taking the tumble that it has. And then obviously getting guys like Aaron Baines in there. It's not the same guy. It's not the same player. It's not the same defense or offensive production. It makes sense because it's not the same interior presence. And, to go from two of the better interior defenders in the league to Aaron Baines is not – obviously you're going to see a fall off there, and that's probably the reason they've taken such a significant dive defensively, even though they're still middle of the pack. It's a rough adjustment, and that's the reason probably why they got off to such a slow start. Now maybe they're starting to figure it out, maybe turn around a little bit.
Yeah, seeing the impact that Marc Gasol has with the Lakers, he's not a guy who's going to put up great numbers anymore, but he just is such a smart player, great passer he's basically like an older Nikola Jokic, the way he can pass the ball and shoot threes. And I think he's just a guy who really just makes an offense flow better when he's on the court. And Serge Ibaka, too, even if he's not that same high-flying, rim-protecting guy, he's still a very respectable defender who can shoot threes. Now they had Chris Boucher, who we've talked about on this podcast quite a bit, about how he has had a great season for them. Aaron Baines is a respectable big man. So I think they did as well as they possibly could to replace that position. But it is a different team there. Nick Nurse, the head coach, is going to have to bounce it out a little bit. And I think he's starting to kind of figure it out. And maybe that's just more like, I'm just going to give all my good players the minutes, and hopefully the rest of them can follow.
Yes, the Tom Thibodeau strategy, huh?
Exactly.
Give all the players the minutes. But, Nick Nurse is a smart guy. He's obviously a great coach. He won a championship in his first year, I believe, right? So, so he's going to figure it out eventually. He's a smart guy. He's a great coach.
Yeah, I think so too. I had higher expectations of the Raptors entering the season. I think they'll end up being a playoff team, and they'll be okay. But they did have a very, very bad start to the year. We talked about the fact that they moved to Tampa was definitely potentially an issue. They're away from their families, new scenery for a team that already had to play in the bubble. So, yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with that. But I think the Raptors will be okay. I am curious to see, though, because I think that Kyle Lowry situation will ultimately tell us as viewers how they're going to ultimately go forward as an organization.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so let's talk about a team that has been shocking, but in good ways. The San Antonio Spurs, this youth movement has been winning some games. They are fifth in the Western Conference standings with a 14-10 record. I don't think anyone could have projected that, at least to start off this season. DeMar DeRozan has had a very respectable year for them. He's been the catalyst of the team. He's leading with points, assists, and minutes. Also top 10 in the league in free throw attempts and shots made at the charity stripe. He's always been known as a guy who can get to the line really well due to his great mid-range game. They also had some breakout guys, too, from their young guys. Lonnie Walker is definitely taking a step forward, having a career year. Kellen Johnson took a huge step forward from year one to year two. Definitely a Twitter favorite, like we talked about last week. We didn't bring him up, but Twitter does love them some Keldon Johnson. And DeJounte Murray, he's definitely the one I've been really impressed with. He's averaging a career high in points, rebounds, and assists per game, averaging 15 points, 5 assists, 7 rebounds. I don't know, Matt. What about your thoughts on DeJounte Murray? Is he one of the most underrated point guards in the league?
Well, I really enjoyed DeJounte Murray's game, and he's one of the better all-around point guards in the game to me, as he can do a little bit of everything. He's not going to blow you away with anything, but he's really good at about everything. But the strides he's taken from a shooting perspective has been what's really taken his game to the next level, I think.
Yeah, I feel like DeJounte Murray, I had like a borderline lottery grade on him entering that 2016 draft, and he just fell to the Spurs. I'm like, how did the Spurs just keep getting these guys in the late first? Like, I feel like everyone just falls to them, and they're like, all right, I guess we'll take them, or R.C. Buford and Greg Popovich and them, and then they just turn them into really good players. And I thought the same thing with Lonnie Walker. I thought he was a lottery pick. He fell out of the lottery. I wasn't the biggest Kellen Johnson fan, but they got him, I think, at the 30th pick. So I was like okay with that selection, or 29th or something like that. But let's talk about in general, how the Spurs really just been able to succeed this year. Again, this was a team, I think people thought maybe they'll be contending for like a play-in tournament game or something like that. But right now they're in the playoffs.
Well, Greg Popovich, you can never count him out. He's got the scheme. He's got, preaches team defense and team play on offense as well. And that is what this team is doing. They're the epitome of that. They might not have any notable players. LaMarcus Aldridge obviously past his prime. DeMar DeRozan, he's taken a step forward this year after a down year last year, maybe adjusting to San Antonio a little bit still. But, this team, they're the epitome of a team and they are going to play. They're going to beat you in so many different ways. They're never going to have the same player score 20 points consecutive games. They're going to have a different guy have a great game each game, and they're all okay with that.
Yeah, I feel like this might be like the hipster team of the NBA this year. I never thought the Spurs would be that because they're always super boring to watch sometimes. Because you never hear any noise or complaining or anything like that. They're kind of like the Patriots of the NBA, like very structured, organized, get your stuff done, no excuses kind of organization. But they got a lot of these fun players, and it's translating to success on the court. It's funny. I was trying to look up some stats, like really, I don't know, like bring this team to life, and they're not really up there in a lot of stats. They're very middle of the pack offensively and defensively, but they just kind of get the job done. I remember watching some fourth quarter. We talked about DeJounte hitting that game-winning shot. They just seem like they're really good at closing out games. A lot of that has to do with coaching, of course, and what Greg Popovich is able to do. But the players are out there on the court executing it, so they're gotta give them credit there too. So do you think that this could be a team that at this point could be a lock to make the playoffs?
I think you might have too much dip on your chip if you're thinking they're a lock for the playoffs. With how competitive the Western Conference is, the standings from teams 4 through 11 could change dramatically on any given day. There was a day about a week or two ago where the Spurs entered the day as a 4 seed, lost, and then woke up the next day as the 9 seed. So there's just too much parity in the West to consider anyone that's not in the top 4 of the Western Conference to be a lock, I think.
I do agree with you there. There's also been some teams like Dallas, and I still think the Pelicans who have underperformed and could potentially slide in there as well. Spurs have definitely outperformed their expectations, but they're at the very least in the hunt, and they look better than they did last year. So I definitely think it's promising. I still think they don't have that franchise player yet, but perhaps if they're able to build this culture up, and it seems like Greg Popovich might not be leaving anytime soon, perhaps he can potentially make a move at someone. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe, anytime they have Greg Popovich still as their coach, is going to be attraction for any kind of free agent.
Yeah, so I definitely think that's interesting as well. But we've hyped up some teams here, the Raptors, Spurs. We're going to be, talking down some players here, unfortunately. We're going to discuss some players that need to step up. They have not had great starts to the season, or perhaps they're struggling as of late. Me and Matt have about 3 players or so on our list here. Matt, who's a player that, in your opinion, needs to play better?
I've got Jamal Murray. After his performance in last season's playoffs, Murray has really come back down to earth to start this season. He's shooting just 34% from 3, which is a tick below his career average, but significantly lower than what we expected after the way he shot the 3 in the postseason. If the Nuggets want to keep climbing with the Western Conference leaderboard, Murray needs to start playing better.
Matt, that was the first person I had on my list was Jamal Murray.
Oh, look at us. That's
Yeah.
the first time in a couple of weeks, man, that we've had somebody on the same list.
I feel bad because we hyped him up a lot on this podcast earlier this year because of how well he was playing in the playoffs. We thought he could potentially be an all-star this year, and he's not had a bad year. He's not been a scrub, but I just kind of wonder. I think the biggest issue with him is consistency. The Nuggets played 16 games in January, and he only scored 20 or more points in 7 of them. I feel like this is a bit underwhelming. I think a big reason why Jokic has had such a great year individually is because he's had to carry so much and had to score so much. Jamal Murray needs to be more consistent. He needs to be that all-star guy. They're paying him like that all-star guy. And I think for the Nuggets to really reach their potential like we saw last season, they need that dynamic duo. We know what Jokic is going to do. We've seen him have the best year of his career so far. Murray has to be that number 2 guy and that definitive number 2 guy on a game-to-game basis. Otherwise, the Nuggets aren't going to make another run at the conference finals.
I couldn't agree with you more, Hunter. We saw, like you said, last year when Murray was playing well, that's when that team really took that next step and took that extra stride towards being a Western Conference Finals team. And, with the way he's played right now, they do not look like the team that was in the Western Conference Finals last year. And, if they want to get back to being a solid top 4, top 3 team in the Western Conference, Jamal Murray needs to take that next step again.
Yeah, I mean, it's starting to almost turn to playoff Murray because he's been great in the playoffs for multiple years, but doesn't live up to that in the regular season. If he's able to consistently bring that mentality every single game, I think then we got that prime final evolution of Jamal Murray.
Yeah, he just needs to be more consistent, like you said.
Yeah. All right. Well, so that was the first player on my list, Matt. So I guess you can go again here. Who is number 2?
I've got DeAndre Ayton. His play has been night and day from game to game, essentially all season long. There will be games where he goes for 20 points, and there's games where he goes for 8. His main problem has been in the pick and roll game, I think, which is surprising given that's exactly what we were both excited about with the addition of Chris Paul to Phoenix in the offseason. He hasn't been rolling to the basket hard enough, and he's been far too reliant on his outside shot as opposed to dominating in the paint, where he is far better. I think we both know that. At what point did the Suns start considering him as more of a trade asset?
Ooh, that's interesting. I don't think anytime soon, because I do think Aiden's got the talent. I feel like big men sometimes come into this predicament where they think they're guards, but they're really not. And Aiden has a respectable, mid-range jumper, trying to extend it off, trying to show off what he improved on in the offseason, I guess, if you will. And the Suns do shoot a lot of threes. And they've had other guys like Mikal Bridges having great seasons as well. Devin Booker has, when we talk about Jamal Murray not building off the bubble, Booker has. He has been, maybe like a borderline MVP kind of candidate, or under the radar kind of guy, because the Suns have had a great year. They've been one of those consistently great teams in the Western Conference in that top four week in and week out. And Devin Booker has been the best player. We talk about Chris Paul and how much he can bring to an organization. Yeah, he's the guy who I think if he's really able to continue his growth, could be that guy that puts him over the top. They're winning games despite him not being consistent. So is he able to be that consistent, dominant big man? I mean, that just makes the Suns even better.
I agree, man. And the Suns, if they're going to make some noise in the playoffs, DeAndre Ayton is going to have to play well both offensively and defensively, especially with the guys being matched up. He could be matched up with Nikola Jokic in the first round. Who knows?
Anthony Davis. I mean, there's some good big men that he's going to have to get his number called. And it's looking like the Suns are going to be a playoff team, and they're going to need everything they have to really make some sort of run, because they're going to be, the new kids on the block, if you will.
Yep.
Because they have not been in the playoffs since Steve Nash was lacing them up in Phoenix. It's been a minute, but I guess good for the Suns fans. They got a nice, loyal fan base, and they finally can see some winning basketball once again. So a guy who I have on my list, you are not going to like him, Matt. I think you know what I'm going to say.
It's Ben Simmons, isn't it?
Ben Simmons.
I knew you were going to do this. As soon as you even formulated this list, I knew you were going to do this.
He had to be on the list, Matt. I'm sorry. Now, let's give him credit. He has been great on defense. We know what he can do. I just feel like with him, he's just not living up to his full potential. He's not untapping it. For a guy who is averaging a career low in points per game, and I get they have other scores, I don't want to see. Why am I paying a guy $30 million to average 13 points per game? I mean, that's the same argument we made with Rudy Gobert. Same thing. And a guy who can't shoot the basketball, he is scared to shoot. You can clearly tell he is scared to shoot the ball. Is he not working on it? Is he just practicing dunking in practice? I have no idea. I mean, I don't want players scared out there offensively, because you even admitted it too a couple weeks ago when we talked about what would hold the Sixers back from making a championship run. It's Ben Simmons. If Ben Simmons, you can't trust him with the ball in his hands at the end of the game to shoot a shot, teams are just going to let him shoot it. They're going to cover up his passing. That you're going to play against that. And like I talk about, I like guys who can dribble, pass, and shoot, triple threat players. If you can't do one of those things, it takes away so much of your game. And if Ben Simmons just got a respectable jumper or even a respectable free throw shooter, he's shooting like 60% from the line. And I bet you he would be more aggressive and try to get to the basket a lot more often if he could rely on having a consistent just free throw percentage. And it's not impossible to fix that. Blake Griffin was like a 50% shooter at the foul line and became like an 80% shooter at the foul line. It's just reps and it's mental. I think Ben Simmons is just kind of his own worst enemy, if you will. As talented as he is, as good as you want him to be, I just don't think he's hit that gear yet. And I just kind of wonder, when's it going to happen? Because now you're on your second contract. And while he is young, once you hit that second contract now in today's NBA, the expectations are going to start coming.
Hunter, everything you just said is something I've said to myself and said to my Twitter fans as
just keep you
more
up
often than you just yes. And I've just kind of gotten to the point with him where I've just kind of accepted what he is. He's never going to get the jumper. It's not going to happen. And like you said, the confidence is his biggest thing. He gets clowned for shooting threes, and he goes out there and takes threes and airballs, and that discourages him from ever doing it again. And I don't even want him to take threes, because obviously it's not his strength. It's not going to be a good offensive possession for the Sixers if he's going to take threes. But if he even just got like a mid-range that was somewhat respectable, I don't know why he doesn't work on that. I don't get it. But to argue your point, be a little bit of a devil's advocate here. He has had 21, 15, 16, and 14 in his last 4 games. So, and he's always going to bring the defense. He's always going to bring the assists. He's always going to get the rebound numbers. He's going to be always close to a triple-double. But if he starts scoring more consistently, that could be good for the Sixers. I think they, need to start encouraging him more, attack the basket more when he doesn't have the ball.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about how, I think the only superstar they have on that team is Embiid. I wouldn't say Simmons is a superstar.
Seth Curry plays on that team, Hunter.
You're right. I'm sorry. Seth Curry.
The better Curry brother.
50-50 to 100 apparently this year.
Yeah.
He hasn't missed a free throw. All 32 of them have gotten it.
Amen,
But
dude.
yeah, I had to bring Ben Simmons up because he's had an off year in my opinion. Not entirely. He's not a scrub. But from an NBA perspective, you're just like, God, like, can this guy just get better, please? I think it's mental with him. There's no way he doesn't practice his jump shot. Like, I'm sure that's all they talk about. He's, I think a really interesting point is Rajon Rondo. I listened to this podcast called All the Smoke with Steven Jackson, Matt Barnes, shout out to them. They had Rondo on there, and he was very blunt. They said, hey, like, you were not a shooter when you came in the NBA, but then you became a pretty respectable shooter. Why did you just what caused you to change it? What did you start doing? And he just said, I start giving a blank. You can guess what that word was. He just said, I stopped caring. I just was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to shoot and see what happens. I think that's Ben Simmons' attitude. It's the same thing with Lonzo Ball. Like, just go for it. Stop being so timid out there and being free because people are going to feed off that vulnerability. It's just going to hold your team back as a result, passing up.
Yeah, and it's so unfortunate because Ben Simmons is an athletic freak otherwise. He's 6'10", who can run like a gazelle. He is an awesome defender, as we talked about. He's a naturally gifted passer. He's a natural rebounder. He's, great at everything except shooting. And it frustrates me to no end. I've been watching you for 4 years, Connor. You don't need to tell me about how frustrating it is. I know. And, everybody keeps saying, all through Sixers Twitter, it's like, get Ben Simmons the All-Star game. Like, no, he doesn't deserve to be an All-Star this year. He doesn't. Last year, he was really good. And he deserved to be an All-Star because everybody's like, he's up and coming star. And he was. But this year, he doesn't deserve to be an All-Star. I think Tobias Harris, if anybody on that team other than Embiid deserves to, I think it's Tobias Harris.
I 100% agree. Tobias Harris had a great season. And Doc Rivers, he had his best season under Doc Rivers when he was with the Clippers.
Yeah.
So I think it was great and a very underrated part that, Tobias Harris had a great year because Doc Rivers knows how to use him in the right ways. And he's had a phenomenal season. I think he is, I mean, again, I'd have to fill out my mock ballot, but I think he's a guy who I definitely consider 100% over Ben Simmons. And Ben Simmons was probably the best player on the Sixers last year. He was all NBA. Embiid just didn't play in as many games. And now it's not even close. Embiid is 100% the best player, an MVP candidate. And Ben Simmons is kind of just lagging behind. And it seems like that Embiid has, people made the argument that Simmons was the most valuable player, maybe not the best, but most valuable. And this year it has not been close. Embiid has been valuable, and it is shown as a result.
Yeah, no doubt that Embiid's the most. He's proven that he's more valuable to the Sixers this year than Simmons was.
Yeah,
last year.
So after our Sixer rant here, which happens usually once per podcast, sometimes more, who else on your list you think is a guy who needs to step up?
So it's not a player, but it's a former player, Steve Nash. I know this is your first year as a head coach, but damn, man, he's got the most talented trio of the league, and he can't figure out how to get the Nets to play some defense. Brooklyn has lost 4 of their last 5, and 3 of those losses have come at the hands of the Wizards, Raptors, and Pistons, who are all teams that the Nets should simply be able to outshoot. And, my hot take was that this team would not make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. You remember that, Hunter? It was with you in that segment on Penn State Sports Night. And so far, they are making me seem like I know what I'm talking about because they just have not been able to compete. They've seen like they're playing their competition, whether they're playing up when they play the Clippers last Thursday or when they're playing down when they lose the Pistons last night. It just can't happen. If you want to be a legit team, you got to figure it out defensively. We've been screaming this from the rooftops for the past 4 weeks ever since they got Harden, and they just have not figured it out.
Yeah, I think I saw something like the worst team to like win a championship defensively. It was like the 0-2 Lakers, and they were like 13th in defense, and I think the Nets are like 28th or something like that right now. They are very, very bad on defense, like really bad. And while it is an offensive league and they got a lot of bullets in the chamber, if you will, with those 3 scorers and even more guys, it if you're not able to play defense at the end of the game, it's going to be a problem because any team can put up 130 any given night. So it's not that hard to do that in today's NBA anymore. It's interesting you brought up Steve Nash. I feel like part of it is not entirely on him because I do feel like he got thrown to the fire a bit. Like he had, again, first-year coach, never coached really on much of any other level. He was a kind of a player development coach with the Warriors. That was about it. He basically was just like, all right, here's your team. This is what we got this year. And then it's like, nope, James Harden, now figure it out. Kyrie Irving's not there. Go figure it out. You got to match Kevin Durant's minutes. He's coming off an Achilles injury. So that's a lot to juggle for any coach, yet along a first-year head coach, which made it interesting why Steve Nash was the hire, especially if they knew they were going to make a move at Harden or Beal or something. Like they knew. But they put him on the spot like that, I feel like is a little hard. And it'd be a shame if he was scapegoated for that per se. But I do agree. You got to have this team. They need to play better defense. It is disgusting to watch. And they should not be losing to teams like this.
Yeah, and Nash is a smart guy, man. He's got a high basketball IQ. I just think he's got to be able to figure it out eventually. And the fact that he's surrounded himself with, his main assistant coach is Mike D'Antoni. Like, that's not going to figure out your defensive woes either. Like, Mike D'Antoni doesn't know anything about defense. So, if you're going to fix your defense, you got to surround yourself with guys that know defense. And he doesn't have that on his staff right now.
Yeah, people say he's like the worst defensive coach of all time, basically.
Yeah.
Like D'Antoni was. But yeah, that's an interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. We didn't really talk about the Brooklyn Nets too much so far here. But I think that Steve Nash definitely has some things to figure out before the Nets can really be a true perennial contender. So next on my list is a guy we mentioned with the Spurs. And that's LaMarcus Aldridge. Now, he is going to be out for a little bit. He got hip injections. Apparently that there's some issues with his hips. But he's only averaging 14.1 points per game on 26.7 minutes per game. That's all career lows outside of his rookie season. So he has taken a big step down. I think he averaged 21 points 2 years ago, down to 18, now down to 14. So he has not been nearly as valuable for the Spurs as they would have liked him to have been when they signed him to that 4 or 5 year contract. Feels like his role's a little messed up. He's kind of just turned to a stretch 5 where we both know that's not his game. He's a mid-range killer, and they need to use him more in that light, more than just a pure 5-man floor stretcher, if you will. And again, there's a bit of a youth movement there going on in San Antonio, but if they're going to be contending for the playoffs, which is looking like that could be their trajectory, LaMarcus Aldridge, they need to get him more involved, and he also just needs to play better too.
Yeah, I think this is a team that could really benefit from making a move at the deadline for a center to get Aldridge out of that stretch 5 position back into power forward where he's more comfortable. I think they would really benefit from a guy like Andre Drummond if they were able to swing a deal for him. I think he would fit kind of well there with obviously a great defender. I think, even just anything to get Aldridge out of a stretch 5 is probably going to be their best case scenario there. He's obviously a better power forward than a center. He did not sign up to play center. He's a great power forward when he's at his best. So I think the Spurs, they need to consider making a move to try to get a center just to get him out of that position.
Also worth noting too, he sucks on defense. So you might as well just maximize his ability on offense. And it's interesting because when I watch the Spurs play, they play Keldon Johnson, who's only like 6'6" at the 4. They play Rudy Gay at the 4. But I wonder if they can mix in a lineup where Aldridge is at the 4 and then Jakob Poeltl's at the 5 potentially.
I was just going to say that. You just signed Jakob Poeltl. You just gave Jakob Poeltl $27 million. You just take advantage of him, put him at the 5.
Yeah, I think that would make a lot more sense. It's crazy to think he's been on the Spurs, I think, for 5 seasons now. I feel like I was like I remember I was like, come to the Lakers, and he was like, nah, your organization sucks.
Yeah.
Back in the day. So yeah, it's crazy that he's been away from Portland for that long a time. Forgot.
I know.
One of the greatest Blazers of all time. But yeah, that was also who rounds out my list here. But next up, we got another fun All NBA team going. We've liked this theme of the fun teams, if you will. Gets us laughing a little bit. This one's gonna be All NBA conspiracy theories teams. Me and Matt have 5 of the wackiest, craziest conspiracy theories. I'll let you go first here, Matt. Which one made your list?
2002 Western Conference Finals Game 6. This is the most obvious one in the history of the NBA. I'm sure you knew it was coming. This game is famous for the Kings actually being 1 win away from the finals, a crazy thought nowadays. And the refs essentially handing the Lakers the wins that the league could have a Game 7 in a great series. In the fourth quarter of that game alone, the Lakers shot 27 free throws compared to the Kings 9 when the game was as close as it could get as the two teams entered the fourth quarter tied at 75. So, and disgraced referee Tim Donaghy, I think that's how you say his name, he worked that infamous game, came out and said that the NBA would have referees favor a team in a game for ratings purposes like that in the playoffs, with this game as the main example. Do you know how different the NBA would be if the Kings had made the finals that year? Kobe and Shaq might not be looked at the same light as they are now in terms of their legacies. It really destroyed the Kings franchise too.
You know what? Well, the Kings absolutely choked Game 7 away too. So
that's true.
Yeah, payback sucks. But
refs weren't great in Game 7 though.
I'll say this. You're probably not wrong, unfortunately, because clearly the evidence is there. Tim Donaghy did say, like, yeah, that game was rigged. And obviously at this point he has no reason to lie. Unfortunately, I think the NBA does some shady stuff sometimes, and unfortunately we're going to uncover some of that. I think a lot of it happened more with David Stern, if I'm being honest. Some piece to him, but and definitely changed the game of basketball. But I feel like a lot of this stuff it kind of stems from him, and that's where this list is going to start for me. The 1985 NBA draft. I think along with the 2002 Western Conference Finals, this is the other one that seemed too good to be true. There was the frozen envelope. They made it colder, so when he touched it, he knew which one it was. It was the first lottery in NBA history. The Knicks ended up getting the first pick, getting a generational talent in Patrick Ewing at the time. They also bent the lottery because it used to be these big envelopes. You see him bend it and throw it in, where they didn't do that with any of the other ones. It was clear as day. So all this conspiracies on here on my list, I believe in them and I think they're true. Or maybe to some capacity. I 100% believe this. There's video evidence. The NBA literally had they copyrighted the 1985 draft lottery and took it off YouTube. They don't really do that with anything. So they know that this was rigged 100%. I don't even question it.
Yeah, this was the second one on my list, Hunter. This is, again, with the 2002 Western Conference Finals, the other most obvious conspiracy in the NBA history. And people ask, why would the league do this? And, it's obviously to me because it's the same reason they would supposedly alter games. It's ratings. Having a superstar in the biggest city in the country would significantly help out the NBA's ratings in the 80s when they were losing popularity because of the rise of the NFL. And I legitimately believe this one because, as you said, in the footage, you can see a bend in the corner of the envelope. You can see them hit it on the edge of the thing. It's I think it's the most obvious one. It was the hardest one for them to cover up or try to hide because they just made it so obvious that they wanted Patrick Ewing in a Knicks uniform.
It was all on camera too. Also worth knowing too, like you could see this happening. You're like, what the heck is this?
Yeah.
And like the way they do the NBA now, like it's ping pong balls and it's like number odds, like basically like whichever one, like,
and they don't broadcast it anymore.
It's
they do it in a back room.
Lottery, and they do it like in a back room where there's no media like at all, and they do film it. We saw Alvin Gentry's reaction when they got the first pick with Zion. So yeah, this is 100% rigged. The way they did, they just picked an envelope out of a thing. Like this was as rigged as it possibly could have been. And obviously you had it on your list too, because that's how blatantly obvious it was. But next on my list, I brought this up to you, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, and it was that Wilt Chamberlain might have a grandson in the NBA, and his name's Otto Porter Jr. Now, if you don't know who Otto Porter Jr. is, that's fair. He's not a great NBA player. But it's funny because he looks exactly like Wilt Chamberlain if you put the side-by-side pictures together, especially when young Wilt Chamberlain, when he had like, the buzz cut and stuff like that. They look identical. And it's also worth knowing, too, that Otto Porter Jr. does not know his one grandfather. Apparently, he's just not in the picture. And I don't know. I don't see 6'8" guys with 7'3" wingspan just walking around every day and happen to be NBA players. So I'm not 100% sure I believe in this one per se because there's no proof or blatant proof. But it wouldn't shock me because given Wilt Chamberlain's history, if you will, like we talked about, it wouldn't shock me if he was able to, produce an NBA player, I guess.
Yeah, so here's the side-by-side of these two together. That's pretty striking, man.
He looks more like him than
that. That's something interesting to chew on, isn't it? That, like, they are, like, identical. I buy into it. I think it's legit.
Yeah, that's definitely a conspiracy theory that I am not opposed to at all. I'm open-minded. I just hope there's some sort of blood test somehow that can confirm that, but it probably will never happen. But I just wonder if Otto Porter knows about it, because if he knew about it, it'd be funny.
Yeah, I want Otto Porter to know about it so we can go get his test. I want to see if he has the same DNA as Will Chamberlain.
And we'll find out.
Yes, dude, this is what I need. I need these answers. I need this in my life.
There's nothing more I want than to figure out if this is true or not.
I need it.
Yeah. Anyways, though, Matt, what other kind of crazy theories on your list?
So remember when Michael Jordan retired in the prime of his career to go play professional baseball? Yeah, that was kind of weird, wasn't it? There are rumors that David Stern found out about Jordan's gambling problem and that it was more severe than any of us knew, or that Jordan's father was killed by men Jordan owed money to. So Stern had to suspend Jordan for a year. But rather than staying the league's single greatest individual moneymaker, and obviously the star of the league, Stern simply suggested that Jordan retire for a year and a half, and he wouldn't release anything about the suspension or his gambling issues. This is juicy, but both Stern and Jordan have shot this down. And after watching The Last Dance, where Jordan was asked point blank about this rumor, he vehemently denied it and simply said that he did this for his late father, who loved watching MJ play baseball as a kid, but still pretty fishy.
Yeah, I think that the Jordan gambling problems were probably underplayed a bit because he definitely did have issues. Do I think his dad was killed because of the mafia and stuff like that? I'm not so sure. I think that's a little too much stuff going on there. But I mean, I guess you never know. Things, crazy things have happened before. In my opinion, I think the reason Jordan retired was just because of the mental stress of winning 3 in a row, and he just wanted to get away from basketball because his dad died. I think was a big reason why. And just the fact that he was just mentally drained and didn't want to play a while. So he's like, I'm just going to do something fun and play baseball. And Jordan's like that ultra competitive guy where he probably really thought he could have been in the MLB. And he saw what Bo Jackson did and what Deion Sanders did and thought, I could do that too. But yeah, I don't actually believe in that one. I do think that.
Neither do I.
Yeah, I can't get behind that. I feel like he just didn't want to play for a while. And kind of just needed the break.
Yeah, I don't really totally believe that one either, but it would the story does kind of line up if you wanted to believe it. So I don't know. What's next on your list, Hunter?
This is an interesting one. And after I kind of looked into it, I totally agree with it. I think that the 2011 dunk contest was 100% rigged.
Okay, who was in the 2011 dunk contest?
Blake Griffin won it.
Okay. So that was his second one, right? Or was it his first?
He's only done it once. Here's my theory. So the game was in LA, right? The All-Star season was in Los Angeles that year.
He dunked over a car. Yeah.
Blake Griffin, up and coming star. He's getting all these endorsement deals. He's in LA. This is our next big thing, Blake Griffin, all the highlight dunks and stuff. If you go back and watch that dunk contest, JaVale McGee was so much better than him. So much better. The dunk, and let's say it's too, right? Because players, there's no guarantee you're going to get to the second round of the dunk contest, right? Mm-hmm. DeMar DeRozan and Serge Ibaka had filthy dunks, and they got vastly underscored. They underscored the living crap out of them, to put it bluntly. Blake Griffin was missing dunks and would still get 50s. When does that happen? That was almost like when Nate Robinson won that first dunk contest and they just wanted to win it. It was basically the same thing, but this one's a little more behind it because there's a whole marketing scheme. So Blake Griffin, they bring out the Kia. This is in the second round. This is you think he would have done this in the first round so he can guarantee himself a win the dunk contest? They had a fan vote that won it for them. It wasn't. They didn't have a panel. It was a fan vote, and who even knows who they actually voted for? And they had this whole orchestrated thing for the Baron Davis to throw it off and have Blake Griffin dunk it. And when you actually think about it, the dunk's not that impressive. I think any athletic NBA player could jump over a four-wheel sedan, four-door sedan. I don't think it's that hard to jump over a Kia. Especially if you're 6'10" and have a 40-inch vertical like Blake Griffin does. Mm-hmm. So I think this was 100% rigged. And then what happens? Blake Griffin just has a Kia deal after the dunk contest. Where does that come from? So Kia was rigging crap. It was 100% Kia's fault. The NBA was colluding with Kia, and they were trying to get that sponsorship deal with the NBA. And Blake Griffin was the star of it. I 100% think the 2011 dunk contest was rigged. You can go watch it for yourself.
Yeah, the 2011 dunk contest sponsored by Kia might have been rigged by Kia. You might figure that, especially at the point where you said it's probably not that hard for a 6'10" guy with a 40-inch vert to jump over the hood of a sedan. It wasn't like he jumped over like
the chorus
the middle
was
of
out. It was like such a spectacle. The dunk wasn't even that
he jumped over the. I think it's the most overrated dunk in dunk contest history, where he jumps over the hood of a car, as if most NBA players couldn't do that, like you said. I think it's probably harder for most NBA players to fit into a Kia than to jump over one. So I think I could buy into this thing being rigged, especially what all you brought up. It's not one that I've thought of, so I like that on your list.
Also, too, Kobe Bryant literally from a vertical stance jumped over a moving car that was going 60 miles an hour at him. So, I don't think it's that hard to jump over a Kia sedan. Just saying. Anyways, though, what else made your list?
You're gonna like this one. David Stern vetoes the CP3 to the Lakers trade. So this one seems like the most valid conspiracy to me. At the time, the league owned the New Orleans Hornets, who were left without an owner after longtime owner George Shinn was diagnosed with cancer, so he stepped away from his duties. A trade that would send the Hornets' lone superstar, Chris Paul, to the Lakers was set in stone and about to be finalized until it wasn't. Commissioner David Stern vetoed the trade for reasons I can only understand as selfish for him and the league's pocket. Stern figured that he would be able to sell the Hornets for more money with CP3 on the team, so he drove up the asking price in trades so high that it was nearly impossible for a team to trade for Chris Paul, especially since this was after the lockout too. So this is exactly what Stern didn't want after the lockout. He didn't want players to form super teams, even though it ended up happening with LeBron and the Heat anyway. But this all happened until Chris Paul was traded in December of 2011, almost a year later, to LA's other team, the Clippers, for a couple of decent players in Minnesota's unprotected first-round pick in 2012 draft, which became Austin Rivers.
Also worth knowing, too, that Anthony Davis, the Hornets won the lottery.
Interesting. Interesting,
isn't
it?
Generational talent in Anthony Davis.
Interesting.
Just saying, NBA trying to screw over the Lakers. Oh man, I was so upset when that happened. I was like, you got to be kidding me!
Yep.
I wanted Chris Paul and the Lakers so bad.
Yeah. And there's no way that Clippers team in 2010 had as good of an offer as a Lakers team in 2010.
No, they were giving up Pau Gasol in that deal.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
It was a pretty fair deal. Lamar Odom was in it, who was coming off a 6 man of the year. They were giving up a lot for Chris Paul. And then obviously they ended up getting Dwight Howard too. That was going to be their big three. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you there. I think you're on to something. So this next conspiracy theory, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but I call it the Yao Ming experiment.
Okay.
So what China did, and this is how Yao Ming was formed. They told the tallest man and the tallest woman in China to have a kid, and that kid was Yao Ming. They then forced him to play basketball his whole life, and apparently they gave him human growth hormone that made him from 6'10" to 7'6".
Wow.
Which is interesting to note because Yao Ming only has a 7'2" wingspan, and he's 7'6". So he has significantly shorter arms than what he actually has. And they basically forced him to play basketball his entire life. They're like, this is what you're doing, and that's it. And then he went on to the NBA. He did it. And Yao Ming actually said, I didn't really like playing basketball that much. I kind of just got forced to do it. And government's beyond on some shady stuff. I'll just say that. I 100% believe this. I think it's true. They basically created a basketball science experiment that ended up being Yao Ming. What's your take on that? I guess you haven't heard this one before.
That I have never heard that before. That's pretty interesting though to think about. That's something to chew on right there too. My only thing is why would the Chinese government want this? Just for notoriety?
Yeah, I mean they didn't have a basketball player in the NBA.
To see a 7'6" Asian man is something you do not see ever. So I totally believe it because I don't think I've ever seen somebody that tall that was Asian. like that's 7 foot. Like
Yeah,
that's
it's a
like
couple, but like the Yao Ming one, like that's true about the whole parent thing. Like they literally were
yeah,
like, "You're gonna make us an NBA player." Like,
that's
they
crazy. Wow.
manufactured an NBA player as best as they possibly could have.
Well,
And
how
it ended
tall
up
were his
being Yao Ming.
parents?
I'm not exactly sure. I didn't look that up, but they literally said the tallest man and woman in China go have a kid.
That's interesting. I'm gonna look for a YouTube video on that later. That's good
There is
stuff.
one because I remember I watched it. Like I knew about it like before, but then I watched the video and I was like, "All right, like this is interesting."
You're gonna make me fall down a rabbit hole, Hunter, aren't you?
Yeah, some of these are pretty intense. I know. But Matt, what rounds out your list here?
So this is probably the funniest one, probably the one that doesn't have the most validity behind it, but it's Delonte West and LeBron's mom.
Oh my
This one is the most obscure one and the one that social media enjoys making jokes about the most. Supposedly, during the 2010 season, LeBron's last year in Cleveland before he left for Miami, his teammate Delonte West was having relations with Gloria James, LeBron's mother. This rumor has very little backing or any remote evidence, but the fact that West's playing time dwindled to nearly 0 minutes in the playoff series against the Celtics when he was one of Cleveland's best players on that team, and was also right around the time that this rumor started gaining some traction. It's quite the thing to think about. Regardless of the validity, I always love hearing the Happy Father's Day jokes to Delonte West. So I don't know. I don't believe it. But it's one of like the most famous ones in social media's perspective. So
Yeah, I can't get behind that one that much.
yeah.
Just because like I feel like LeBron would beat the crap out of him. Like,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? Like I feel like it would have ended way worse than what.
Yeah, I feel like
would've
something
actually
worse
happened.
than Delonte West losing playing time would have happened.
Yeah,
So
personally, LeBron would have sent his goons or whatever.
sent Rich Paul at
Rich
him.
Paul would have called some people.
Yeah.
Think a lot. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. That's definitely one of the funniest conspiracies that's always out there. I don't know if I believe that one though.
I don't believe it either. I just thought I figured I'd throw it on the list because it's one of the most famous ones.
It is one of the most famous ones, and I didn't have it on mine. So next up, mine's pretty famous. So you remember Thon Maker and how he was
Of
like
course I
an
do.
absolute stud in high school?
Yes.
Well, that's because he wasn't actually 16 years old.
In high school, yeah.
Nope, not at all. So, for those of you who don't know, I believe he's from like South Sudan. He then moved to Australia, then moved to the USA, and then he played in Canada, and then eventually went to the NBA. So the interesting thing about Thon Maker is he technically graduated high school in 2016, but they actually found him in a high school yearbook in Australia in 2011 when he graduated from there. So if he was supposedly 18 years old or whatever his age was coming into the NBA, he was actually like 24, which makes a whole lot of sense why he was killing guys. And it makes sense that he hasn't gotten that much better as a basketball player since because he peaked physically in high school. Like, because he was like a grown man. Like,
Yeah.
Look, we see this all the time. I remember back in my travel days, I'd be playing these teams and I'm like, these kids aren't 13. They're dunking in
Yeah.
the freaking like we're playing against them and they're like throwing down windmills in pregame layup lines. I'm like, yeah, you're not 13 years old. Get out of here. You have a beard. You have a James Harden beard. There's no way. It's like in bench warmers where he gets the I am 12.
I am 12, yeah.
Exactly. I'm like Thon Maker's no way this guy's actually like his said age. He's 100% older and way older. This one I 100% believe because there's literal proof. Why would he just show up? There's no other 7-foot guy named Thon Maker in the world, I bet, that just happens to also play basketball and looks exactly like you.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely pretty interesting. I think that probably has a lot of validity behind it. I've heard of that one before, but I haven't dug too deep into it. But I've definitely heard of it before. I remember Bleacher Report brought it up in one of their Game of Zones episodes or whatever. But that's interesting, and it makes a lot of sense of why he has not gotten better, as you said, because playing against high school kids from 2011 to 2016, like you're not going to get any better. That's going to stun your growth as a basketball player. So playing as high schoolers for that long and then making the jump to go play against NBA players, it's a pretty steep hill to climb, and that explains why he's not gotten any better in the NBA.
Yeah. And like I said,
is he even on a team?
Oh yeah, he's on the I want to say Pistons or something like that.
Yeah, because the Pistons, a big guy.
Yeah, of course they need no one. Yeah, I 100% believe that. I just wish Thonmaker would go out and say it. Buddy Hield actually lied about his age. He said he actually lied about his age. He said he's a year older than he actually is. Yeah. That was a couple of years ago. Someone asked, like, it says you're like 20. It's like they said, like, so I don't know how it came up, but I think it said like it was like his birthday, and he said he was like 27. Like, oh, I thought you were 26. He's like, no, I lied.
Did he like reclassify or something?
No,
to, like, get into a younger class.
I mean, I don't know. Well, he's from the Bahamas. He's not like, so he's like technically kind of a foreign player. Yeah, he lied by a year though. He said he was a year younger than what he actually was, and he admitted it. So I'm okay with that. But yeah, Thonmaker is like 5 years older than what he actually is. So I don't want to hear that. He looked like a grown man in high school, and it made sense because he was in fact grown.
He was almost a fully developed human being. Yes, that's crazy. I like that one. I'm definitely gonna fall down a rabbit hole watching all these conspiracies later.
Yeah, and like I said, all the ones I listed, I personally believe 100% or to some extent. That one I do believe though.
Yeah.
So that's going to wrap it up here on Ball Don't Lie. I hope all of you listening to this are probably going to immediately go on your laptops or phones and look up these videos and conspiracy theories and fall down rabbit holes like me and Matt perhaps will. But again, 35 episodes, quite an accomplishment. Next milestone is 40. We'll hit that in 5 weeks approximately. So be sure to tune into that content because we're in the swing of things here in the NBA.
Yeah, it's a great time to be alive.
Great time to be alive. Thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you next week.
See ya.
Thank you for watching this edition of Penn State Sports Night. If you're a fan of our content, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more clips. Also, follow us on Twitter at PSSN TV and on Instagram at PSU Sports Night to keep up with all the action. For all my colleagues, we are Penn State Sports Night.